Right, we'll get started. Good afternoon, everybody. We have just turned into the afternoon. Welcome to this Street Games webinar on engaging local politicians. My name's John Downs from Street Games. I'm the development director for Place, Youth and Sport, which so I suppose part of my job is I look after the teams working across the North, East, Northwest and Yorkshire, but also I've been at Street Games since 2007. So I've seen a lot of the work we've done and spend quite a bit of time working with my colleague Duncan, who's also on the call, in developing some of our public relations work and also attending things like the party conferences every year and engaging politicians and MPs that way. So hopefully we can share some of that learning with you around this workshop. I'll let Duncan introduce himself.
Hi everyone, I'm Duncan Milroy. I am the head of communications and marketing at Street Games, and work very closely with John and other colleagues at Street Games in our public affairs work, especially as we have a new government. We're very much stepping up this work over the next 6 months, trying to engage some of the new MPs coming into Parliament. And like John said, hopefully we can share some of our experience and some tips to engage your local politicians.
So with it being a webinar, we've got you on. People are in cameras off and mute, which is unlike if you're in lots of Teams meetings like we seem to be at this time. So if you want to, welcome to pop into the chat who you are, where you're from, just so we've got a record. We will also we'll also have a chance for hopefully some questions later on that you can pop into the chat, and we will share some information on some of the PDFs of the slides and things that we've got from this, and hopefully you find it really important, really informative. I suppose, and what we're going to do is kind of just share experiences and hints and tips that have worked. What we want to do, as it says on the screen there, is look at why this is important for you and your organisation, the benefits it can bring, and the techniques you can use. And there's no one size fits all. You know, some of you will be experiencing these things and have tried different things, and maybe want a few more hints and tips and try things that haven't worked. But you know, hopefully we're going to give you some information around you know, some new ideas and some things that we've tried, and some of it will be information you're aware of. So we're not going to delve too much into some of the things. We just want to give you a real kind of good overview of the work we do and how it's become how it's become an important part of what Street Games does. So yeah, Duncan, you're going to click to the next slide.
Yeah,
I suppose that the first bit here is so what we're going to cover in the webinar is you know, and hopefully not being patronising, what we mean by local politician in terms of there's a whole range of different people and the roles they play, and actually what we know is the benefit to your organisation. It's not necessarily what their job is, but what can they do for you, or what the benefit to the work you do is. Tactics and techniques to engage in getting the most from it. We're going to share some cases and examples, and also we're going to share some things that haven't worked. And I suppose the reality of some things we just have to accept of working with politicians and local politicians, because it's not necessarily all plain sailing, but it's something we just have to be. We have to accept and be. It's part of the journey or part of the work that we're doing. Next slide, Dunk. So why we do this, and I think what's really important is that the first bit is that we want to get key messages to elected officials. They represent the interests of local communities, young people, they need to know what's going on and the challenges faced in underserved communities. If we're to get them to change things, if we get them to invest in things, we need to make sure they're hearing the key messages, and key messages from trusted sources, local organisations, people that have got the know-how, and people have got the voice of children, young people, etc. So actually getting young people from voices of children, young people is really important to them. So it's a really important thing that it's about getting key messages to people, the people who might be able to make the decision that does things on your behalf and for the young people you work with. It's also to raise, we do it for Street Games to raise our profile. You know, we some of this is not about not being shy about things. It is a good way to raise your profile. It gets the strategic positioning, and to create new opportunities. you know, if we can, and links to key departments, key government departments, key local authority departments, and ultimately to secure some future funding. Funding is needed to deliver the work we do as organisations. So this helps us secure future funding, and also it's about sustainability and resilience. And a conversation I've had with other organisations about what do we mean by sustainability, and given a time of political change, as Duncan said, if this workshop was done. And the election was in October, the tone might be slightly differently because we're thinking about the elections coming up. Now we've got a new set of MPs, a new government, and new councillors in places, new police and crime commissioners, and new mayors. Then the message is slightly differently. But working in this space helps build sustainability. And what I like to talk about being and resilience, and actually help it get support can really help be more resilient to change. Having a good way of engaging politicians and decision makers and those who are responsible for key budgets in areas means that you can ride the changes, and it's no guarantee, and there's no guarantee of being sustainable. But if you can then work through change of governments, and for Street Games, we started off very much in the Labour government in the New Deal for Communities areas, and then have worked through the various different Conservative governments and different change to councils and police and crime commissioners and elected mayors. So that change you've got to be able to ride through. And ultimately, yes, it's about the key messages, and ultimately it's also about helping you as LTOs and organisations. We want to, it's advocacy, drawing down the funding, gain local support for the work you do. So Street Games wants to do a national message to political parties and politicians, but we also want to support the local message. It's about local advocacy for the work that's done. That's about, ultimately, if we think about our strategy, our end game, more doorstep sport for young people in areas of deprivation, more activities for young people who have less access to stuff. We need to get that kind of political support at all levels. So it's a really important thing for Street Games to do. I quite often question myself that when I'm 4 days at a party conference, you wonder why you're here. But there's the key messages that are about we're trying to do these things, and we're trying to secure more opportunities for young people. Next slide, Duncan. So what I want to give as well is I suppose some of my experience and some of I'm based up in the Northeast, but I've worked Street Games all over the country. And I think it's just worth noting that what we mean by local politicians and using some examples, and we're going to give some examples. So, we've just had our election, and in May, we actually had a mayoral election for certain areas, and some of the combined authority parts of the country had mayoral elections and police and crime commission elections. A couple of months later, we had our general election. So, some of you may be based in the Northeast. So in the Northeast, we've got a real mixed political makeup of where we need to think about where does that engagement land. So if you just click through, Duncan, the bits that we've got there coming up. So the Northeast Combined Authority has been set up, and we've got, just click through them, Duncan. We've got one elected mayor. We've got 2 police and crime commissioners covering that space. We've got 20 different MPs, 7 local authority councils, so the 7 leaders of those councils that we might want to engage with, and cabinets in that, and 523 ward councillors across that patch. And all of those play a role in thinking, if we're thinking about the local political landscape, there may be other bits, minor bits within there, because sometimes you've got borough councils and things depending upon your makeup, but broadly across somewhere like the Northeast, which covers County Durham all the way up to the top of Northumberland and the Scottish border, there's a lot within there, and that's you could take that to any part of the country and go. You could go to parts of Yorkshire, you could go to the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, which has got many more people, of 10 local authorities. Suddenly, that's a huge. That's going to have one elected mayor, but 1 police and crime commissioner, because that's the deputy takes on that responsibility. So the local makeup is important to know, because it's useful to know what the landscape is about the different politicians, but ultimately knowing what they can do for you and the support that you and the work you do in your organisation. So on the next couple of slides, we've got some tables that are going to go through those things. They're not exhaustive in a way. They're not that cover everything. But what I thought we'd do is talk through that in terms of where we see the benefit for your organisation and what they can do for you in terms of terms of an areas of responsibility. So if you've got an elected mayor in a combined authority, you might not have one, depending on who you are. So I think, I can't remember how there's maybe 10 or 12 elected mayors across the country, you know, who cover combined authority places. So ultimately, they're a leader for the area with devolved power, and they carry significant budgets. Usually, for key areas, the North East Combined Authority does things like business development, skills, training, transport. You know, I'm originally from the Northwest and know Manchester really well, and I think you've seen, if you're based there, the things like transport, the changes to the transport system based upon the combined authority and the mayor there. So there's some significant things they have control over, and they have localized decision making on the use of a lot of this funding. So they have an interest in local issues. They bring together the local authorities to work together and better use of the funding that's there. That's not straightforward. That's usually the kind of the plan and the rhetoric that will all work together, but that's yet to be seen, I suppose, in certain areas, and it's working better in other combined authority spaces where local authorities are working together. Mayors also have their own priorities. So the elected mayor for the North East has a real focus on reducing child poverty. So for street games, that's a really, really important and significant thing that we can work with them on, because that's obviously our focus areas and what we do. So, understanding their local priorities, they can be a really good advocate for your work, and ultimately they can also influence businesses and funders to support your work. They're influential people who carry significant budgets and significant influence over local authorities. In some places, the elected mayor their deputy mayor is also the police and crime commissioner, which is another elected position. And in some places, you will have voted, or but you could have voted for your police and crime commissioner. So the North East Combined Authority's got one for Northumberland and one for County Durham. So they're retaining, and the elected mayor and her office doesn't have responsibility for the police and crime commissioner. But I know for Greater Manchester, and I think for Merseyside, the deputy mayors do have responsibility for the police and crime commissioner office function. So it's different in different places, but they're another significant role within that. And again, police and crime commissioners, I mean, their role, if you're not aware, is to hold the police force to account and understand and to support interventions programs around community safety and victim support. But ultimately, in terms of doorstep sport, street games where, your LTO, they have budgets to spend on crime reduction and supporting victims. Some house violence reduction units that have a focus on reducing those violent crimes, and again, have further funding to support things. And many do focus on young people with funding for activities, education programs in schools, community activities, working with youth justice. So they are an elected official. They are working with the police. In some places in County Durham, for instance, it's a merged police and crime commissioner with the fire service commissioner. But in terms of where we're thinking our work is that they're interested in areas of high crime and social behaviour and supporting the victims of that. And we do know from data they overlay with like areas of street games delivery or areas of deprivation. So it becomes an important piece of work to engage with police and crime commissioners in terms of what funding they do have in places. The next one on this table is the local authority council leader. Now, you could substitute in as deputy leaders essentially, but the leader of the local council is the senior local elected ward councillor. They tend to also have a ward council that they look after, and lead the local council cabinet, and they're the lead for things like council budgets and key strategic direction and decision making. Of the council budget. So if the parties match up locally, they can often have good links with local MPs. And I think the reality is, in this current climate, on the back of the general election, there'll be a lot of places where you will have the MP matching up with the leaders of the local council. A few years ago, it wasn't the case in certain places, so that was very much more difficult to navigate and to get things done. But if the parties line up and the plans line up, it makes it a bit easier. So they do have good links to local MPs. Some are often touted to become the next local MP after being local leader of the council, but they have influence on the focus areas for local, in terms of focus policy areas for local authority, and the actions of senior local authority staff. So when there's an event, when there's something, you're working with local authority staff, to quite often want to invite the leader of the local authority, the deputy leader, the elected members. They are really, really important for local authorities. And I think I recognise some of the names on the call that may have worked in local authorities in the past or still do. The local elected members are seen as a really important part of the organisation to engage with, and they're ultimately the bosses of local authorities. So they do hold significant influence. I was in the room with one on Friday last week, and they didn't seem that engaged in this event for young people until the young person mentioned that the ward they lived in was the ward he represented as well. And it wasn't a nice place to live, and he suddenly became very interested in what was going on, and ultimately then very interested in what young people were doing across Newcastle. So, you know, they can have influence. It's finding the right trigger for them to be engaged. So, you know, they're the first kind of three to think about. Next slide, Duncan. So the other ones there, and this is not to be through order, but I have laid them out in terms of what they do. Is your local MP. Now we have, as Duncan said, we now just have had a general election, and they're all slightly differently, you know, but they will have a link to national policy and programs. They can take things from what's going on locally, from you, hear from you. They're very much to be your a representative locally. The others are all representatives to influence stuff, but ultimately your MPs don't have as much direct influence and budget to spend on things locally than maybe your local authority leader does, or your police and crime commissioner does. But they have influence over what they can influence what the local authority can do, but they have more influence on other parts of the system. They have influence on national policy. So, and they can be influenced as the local business. They're really, you know, they can be good advocates. They can be a positive public advocate for your work if they've got a good reputation. So, them talking about your event in your organisation can be really good to raise the profile of what you do. But ultimately, also your MP could also be involved in other work in Westminster. They could be a cabinet member for the government. So, having a look of who the cabinet members are. They may actually be a cabinet member for something that's linked to young people or sport or health or something. They could have a role in the government department, so they could be linked to Department of Education or DCMS. So those of you who are based in Wigan or in the northwest area, Lisa Nandy is now the DCMS minister for Department of Culture, Media and Sport. So anything sport, culture, youth related, she might be interested in, and also she's also so if you're in Wigan or in that northwest area, that becomes like really interesting and really useful to know. They also could be have a role in parliamentary groups. So there are things called all-party parliamentary groups, which often have different themes. There's one for young people of the north, which we are involved in, which is about understanding issues affecting young people in the north of England, as it says on the tin. There's APPGs for youth, for sport, for community safety. There's a whole range of them. But again, that's where politicians come together to raise issues and try to get support for different things in government. So awareness of people, if people are leading those or sitting on APPGs, they may be able to take what you tell them into that national thing and advocate for the work you do. And they might also be on committees. It's now not a thing anymore, but I work with previous MPs who were on the Levelling Up committee. So they getting information to them about the importance of the levelling up idea and agenda of supporting areas of deprivation was really important. So local MPs are important. They tend to be more well known, I think, in certain circles, and they can be good for PR and influence, but actually they don't necessarily hold local budgets that your elected mayors may do, or your leaders of the councils or your PCCs may do. So, but they can play a different role. And finally on this list is the ward councillors, and you know, they have a much more localized role, but they can be very good local advocates of your work. You know, they don't have as much capacity as your MPs do or as your leader of the council, but they are quite important within the local authority framework and makeup. And sometimes they have budgets that they can choose to provide to local organisations. So some have local ward budgets and can pop money into. And I've experienced councillors popping money into the school I was a governor of to help put a new fence up or give some money to organisations to run some half programs. So they can have quite a lot of local influence, and again, within the local authority system, they're quite important to be informed of what's going on. And if I've worked in half programs, if there's a need, if a council wants to know what's going on in their area, council staff are really interested to answer the need of the questions from their elected members first and quickly. So they clearly have some influence. But like MPs, ward councillors may have other roles. They might be portfolio holders. They might have a job in the cabinet for responsible for skills or young people or health and things like that. So there may be people who have a bit more influence on what goes on. And also there could be committee members, council committee members. There'll be different committees on planning and community safety and things like that. So no, they will have different roles they play. So some of those ward councillors may be really, really useful to organisations or useful to speak to because they have a role in maybe what young people's issues are or education, employment skills and things like that. So knowing the different layers and hopefully it might be useful for some of you. Hopefully it's not patronising the way. We're just trying to lay out that what we experience, the different members, the different political roles that are in that space have a real kind of breadth of benefit to your organisation, your LTO, and understanding how that can be used will just help the engagement speed up. So you're asking the right thing of the right elected member to support the work you do, and you're getting your information to the right person to take it to the right place. Next slide, Duncan. And what we thought would be useful here is then some examples. And again, we'll talk through some of these and we've got a couple more slides before we stop for questions in this. Is that so for street games and the work that, and I suppose some of this is the work that I've done over the years of with and for some of our colleagues with elected mayors, and say if you have one, things like engaging with the mayor's office led to the deputy mayor who acts as the police and crime commissioner. I've said that within a mayoral space, they've passed it into engagement with youth programs and engagement with our safer program in terms of some of the mapping and audit work and investment in programs. So, it might not be the mayor we're engaging with directly, but their office has led to engagement in other programs to benefit street games and awareness of that in that space, knowing that we talk to the mayor, that gets us to the police and crime, the deputy mayor who's the police and crime commissioner. We've got something that they'll be interested in. And from my experience within the North East, with the new mayor identified, what we started to do is work with their office and their team on how we can align what we do to their policy areas. So not being asked directly for funding, but actually, you're interested in child poverty, so are we. And we've got all this 17 years of work in child poverty and work in the region. We'd like to work with you on doing this. So it's an offer to them of we can really want to work with you, and we become an advocate or a partner to work with early on. So identifying where we can be a support to them. And as Duncan said, so now is a really interesting time. A whole load of new MPs looking to make their mark and do their work in a local area. So you could become a very useful, beneficial partner or organisation for the MP to work with, and it's building that relationship and seeing the tactics that could lead to something. So being of real benefit is important when we've looked at it. I think some of you will know about the Police and Crime Commission, what we've done, but actually across various PCC areas, we've got support from the PCCs and within the VRUs to build the SAFER programme, creation of posts embedded in VRUs, but advocating for local funding direct to LTOs. Police and Crime Commissions have been a really a real source of positive engagement for street games. But within a local space, it has been about the advocacy of making sure their investment can get down to organisations to do the key work. But that's been backed up with the research and insight and modelling. So, we've identified that is a key angle and putting the support there. But it's started off with like we've done with the mayors, we can really help you deliver your outcomes you want in your space. And some of the PCCs, from my experience, have been really focused on victim support as opposed to stopping low-level crimes and things like that, or the focus of the policy areas is slightly different. So again, tailoring it to them. knowing what the ask can be, but we've spent a lot of time working with police and crime commissioners. An example with local authorities is actually the leader of the local authority advocating for our work across the local authority space. So actually what they're able to do is open up the conversation with strategic staff within the local authority that leads to things like contracts and new programs or opportunities to develop new approaches. So it's using that influence to find the bit of what they're interested in and presenting them with a solution. And then, as I said, you then have the opportunity to do some work with the local authority. So the local authority leader has been somebody where we've engaged with at events, we've invited to events to showcase what we do, and they're a person to open the door to the staff who do the delivery of programs. So the directors of public health, directors of children's services, and it's knowing that that's what we want from them, is just to raise the awareness of the work we do in their local authority and the importance of it. And we would like to have a conversation with some of their colleagues or staff that can help us do more and help them do more. When it comes to MP engagement, and an example, there's something that we've done through that I did recently up in the northeast. Was I met an MP at a national youth event, and he raised a question about wanting to do more for young people in his patch. So we presented them with a chance to speak to a range of local youth organisations, what went on in their area, the challenges, the support. So we facilitated local organisations to come together with MP. It was identifying that he's an influential person in the area. He's really interested in this topic, so get him to speak to groups and find out what the problems are, what the challenges are, and can he then go off and advocate on behalf of this sector. He can't then say, right, well, I've got a pot of funding that can put into this, but he can go and speak to local authorities, he speaks to local businesses. One of the things that came out was organisations having a real lack of access to school facilities when that's the only facilities around. So he went and spoke to head teachers of schools and went, why can't these organisations use your facility? And then suddenly schools are up, schools are saying, oh, it's not a problem. Yeah, we can let them use our facility. So just by them asking the questions sometimes can lead to some influence. And ward councillors, we've within a couple of examples, we've engaged with ward councillors around particular portfolio holders around children and young people. And what we did in one local authority was we did a pilot programme with the local authority, and then invited the portfolio holder for children and young people to come and see it, spend the day, and meet the young people involved in it. And they loved the approach so much that they were like, they advocated to, and they kind of, through their influence, spoke to the local authority department to say, we need to carry this on. So within their programme planning, they carried on running. They've been running this programme now for its 4th year, where we're a key partner delivering work with them. So they had real influence because it was something they saw. They were the portfolio holder and could say, well, this has to be something we can run running. So became an advocate for finding the budget to keep that programme going was really important. And ultimately, we also know local ward councillors have given us given LTO support for holiday funding, matched to half. So where they've had pots of money, they've been able to give it to organisations knowing they've got half funding, and distribute it to small charities, local youth organisations, sometimes with a lot less restriction than you've got for half funding, but it's been able to match funding to open out information for, open out opportunities for more children and young people in the school holidays. So again, a real range of things there, but ultimately we know what we're asking of them. We've got much more consistent and much better understanding at what do we need to ask of a local politician. What if they ask, and what are they going to be beneficial? What's going to be beneficial for street games or local organisations? And there's just some examples of some of the things that we've done with those different layers of politicians to generate opportunities. Next slide, Duncan. So behind all this, what we wanted to talk about was some of the tactics that would really work here. And there's just a kind of simple diagram that Duncan and I talked about, that if we start with the local politician, we've got to start thinking about, okay, so that we've got to build this web of or links and connections around them. It's not necessarily just an individual ask, and you'll see where I'm going with this, given some examples. So if you bring up the next few bubbles there, Duncan, you go, so you've got your organisation going, actually, with my organisation, what are we doing, and we've got a link to them. But actually, there may be a local issue that also links to that. It might be something positive or negative that's happened locally that might go on, and that local politician, it could be the MP or it could be the police and crime commissioner, but understanding that local issue is really important. But you might also have some recent success to share related to the issue. So it could be that you might be in the organisation that's improved the local community or local issue, or you might have some success that could tackle the local issue that the politician is really interested about or that's happened. So first level, understanding those local connections and what gets the politician interested is really important. Next view, and then there may be other bits that link into this, and it's all about thinking these connections that, is there a partner, is there a passion or interest of the politician that they're interested in? So actually, I met a local police and crime commissioner who used to be a youth worker, and she's really passionate about young people because that's her background. So ultimately, we're talking about the success of youth organisations delivering stuff in her patch, and that can address things like lack of activities and lack of provision for young people in certain areas. So we're drawing in lots of messages that we look really multi-layered to the politician. But also we're bringing in partner organisations. I think doing it with others is really important in this tactic, that built around that politician having then partner organisations involved that may share some of the success. They may be part of a campaign. They may also be aware of the local issue is really important. And there might also be campaigns that are going on that you can tie into. So this is where you might capitalise on national campaigns or regional campaigns, or maybe the politician has got a campaign that they're interested in. So they may go out publicly and say, I'm really interested in this, or I'm standing up because I want to promote this positive issue. Can you build that support around them? So that ask has got many links to it that adds multiple benefits to the politician. And thinking through those bits and of thinking the connections is really, really important. And as I said, just last week, conversation with the new police and crime commissioner up by me, awareness of the local issues. We were sat there with partner organisations we bring into the conversation. Therefore, we look open to working more collaboratively. But we understood that where her passion interest was lying around young people and positive activities, young people, we can start to share recent successes. We've got young people, the voice of young people there talking about, this is one more from our manifesto, or we've got some examples of really positive projects. The example of the MP with the focus group was his passion interest was children and young people, based on his daughter being a youth worker. He's worked in the health service. So again, we started to bring partners into the room. We convened it, brought organisations in, and talked about, on the back of some of the national youth work campaigns, about the need to invest in youth work services. But you had so there's lots of ways to link into this that can give a kind of collection of messages to the politician, not just sometimes a direct ask of, I'm going to write to my politician, be it council or whatever, and say, I want some stuff. We're presenting a range of things that offer value, offer insight, and offer voice of local people to those politicians for them to try and take it forward and do something with. So that's just an overview of the tactics. What we've got on the next sheet here is, and Duncan's forward the slide on, is a range of tactics. And again, we're not going to go into depth. We could spend hours going into depth into them. All I want to give you time for questions later is, so there's things that we've done that have been successful, finding out areas of passion and interest, a particular cause. It could be local area, previous job they had. Some have been youth workers or teachers or doctors and things. So actually that's really useful. What did they get elected on? What's in their manifesto? So the mayor for the combined authority in the North East, part of hers was about skills and training for young people, children in child poverty. So therefore, what was sent out before an election? What is useful to know that you can talk to them about? Look at the party. What do they stand for? Policy pledges is useful. Do they have any of the roles? Is there a double up effect? So like I said, are they on a committee? Are they a portfolio holder in a council, or are they an MP that's on the cabinet? In the summer, we've got an event in Newcastle that we're looking to organise and invite MPs to, because one of the MPs in Newcastle looks like she's going to be the schools minister. And one of the MPs in Sunderland is now the Secretary of State for Education. They become really important because they're interested in things like HAF funding, and they're going to be responsible for those bits. So understanding their roles is really important, because it's about knowing what the message you can get to them. Really, one of the key things is having a reason for contacting them. Do you know what you want to get from it? So is there a message you want to support? Is it a topic they're interested in, as I've said? Do you have something to promote or attend an event or a launch of report? So it's not just a cold thing. It's a come to this thing, see this research, here's our annual report, whatever. Ultimately, and have a good reason to engage in your organisation. There's got to be a thought process of what's a benefit for them to get engaging, because that has to be part of the thought process, that there's going to be some benefit for them to engage. It might be just to hear from local people to give them some insight, but it could also be that there's some links to their campaign or the other things that they're passionate about. So some MPs often have campaigns. If any of you've done HAF funding, that was created and launched years ago. The idea of holiday hunger by an MP called Frank Field. He was incredibly passionate about young people and holiday hunger, and he started the mission. So we were engaged with Frank Field as an organisation on, we're also interested in this, Frank. We've got some insight. We want to share it with you. We then become at that conversation about that, and Frank was really interested in talking to our old Chief Exec Jane and other organisations about what do we know about holiday hunger, as well as other organisations. And all what you look back on and go, well, as a programme like HAF then resulted in some of that pressure from something like Frank Field. Do you understand and can you promote the benefits to local politicians? So understand that promoting that benefit, also be clear on your ask of the local politician. What do you want them to do? Because quite often they ask, what do you want from me? And it's like, well, being really clear. And that links to what their job can be. So asking them something that they can actually do or being realistic. Be prepared, it may take time it's about building relationship. So, things may happen after the engagements. You want to be memorable for them. You want them to go, I had a really good time. I've learned a lot. It was a great visit. I want to go back and speak to that organisation again. But it's about building a relationship with those local elected members. Also have some plans to share with the communications of what took place. So can you tag them? Can you get comments? Can you get them? Can you tag them in your things, or vice versa? Get them to put a post out on social media. A lot of them do, and tag your organisation. So it's no good if they just take a picture and be there at an event, had a great day at this event, and don't tag your organisation in. So making sure you have some comms plans. I think working with others, connecting with like-minded organisations is really important, and also think about being part of larger campaigns to help promote your local message. So there's lots of tactics there. There's no one size fits all that says this is the route you definitely must take, but thinking about those tactics become really important, and techniques, because it all depends upon the individual and their role, and you having a plan to do something with them. I think some organisations, my past just go, well, I've wrote to my MP, I've contacted them. There's got to be a real reason for them to engage with something, and one of these should really help you. Duncan, do you want to see the next slide? Give me a break from people hearing my voice about the techniques to communicate with them.
Yeah, thanks, John. So this is mainly focused on direct outreach. I mean, a lot of this stuff will be pretty obvious to most of you on the call, but it's worth going through some of it. So at Street Games, when we are looking to engage local politicians, we tend to run letter campaigns, or we support our network in sending letters out to their local MP. So, like every MP and councillor is different, and it might take a while for you to figure out, especially with lots of new MPs and new councillors coming into their roles. It might take a while to figure out which is the best way to communicate with them and which methods works best for them. But letter and email campaigns are a really effective way of getting to them. Inviting them to local events. John's covered a lot of this already, but it's always, it's a great way for local politicians to really understand your organisation and for them to experience it. A lot of MPs and councillors hold constituency surgeries, so like they advertise them on a weekly basis. So it's always worth, if there's something that you particularly need help with or you're campaigning on, it's always worth attending these surgeries as and when you can. Another good way of keeping them abreast of like what's going on in your community or the issues that are important to you is send them the newsletter if you have one. If that's being sent out to some of your stakeholders, then yeah, local politicians are also included in that, and it's worth adding them to the list. Obviously, GDPR rules apply here as well. And And then there's the social media angle as well. You know, I've put on there that 86% of MPs have an active Twitter account. I've put a link in there about like who about finding MPs on Twitter, but this is a good way to, you know, to contact them in a public forum. There's also an accountability angle to this as well. If I mean, sometimes it's a bit of a last resort if you are getting frustrated about the lack of communication, but it can be a really effective way of engaging MPs through social media, and also a good way to, as John said before, to celebrate stuff and to tag them into the post so that they can see the great work that your organisation is doing. A couple of other things I just wanted to mention as well that's not on this slide. I guess because a lot of this is direct outreach, and we find it's really important that whatever key messages you're sending, whether it's through a letter or an email, or stuff that you're raising at a surgery, I think it's really important to also mirror some of those key messages if you have a website. So having that having a presence on your website about what it is that you're campaigning about, or what sort of issues that you want to be resolved, whether it's a case study or a news article, having some sort of presence on your website, or if you haven't got a website, on your social media channels, because a lot of the time local politicians will follow up, or their staff will follow up, and the first protocol might be looking on your website. So it's really important to have that consistency. And the other thing that is worth mentioning is having really clear contact details, so that they can do the follow up with you, so that you can start to have those conversations and like John says, to build those relationships. So yeah, I'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah, so I think we're almost at the end now of the slides. Hopefully there's some time for questions if anybody's got any. But one of the things we want to also is be really honest in sharing that sometimes things don't go plan, and we've got to accept some things. And there's some, again, stories of stuff that we want to learn, and sometimes it helps you frame how to do things again better and different. So in the future, so sometimes being too direct with the asset funding, I've been in situations where what do you want? Give us some money, and they're like, well, we're not up for that, and that damages the relationship. So, you know, sometimes it's right, sometimes it's not. It depends on or asking the wrong person for the funding. So sometimes it's about building that relationship. The other thing we've expected, some things, particularly with MPs, expecting things to happen really quickly because they're elected, but they're busy people with lots going on. So suddenly expecting that you've had a meeting with them, you've suggested this, and it will happen quickly. That may not happen. With other things, it can happen a bit quicker, but there are wheels in motion and things that take time to deliver. So sometimes we've made mistakes with expecting things to happen quicker. And I think back to Duncan's thing about invitations, about inviting them too quickly. So actually you need to get things out there early, rather than I've got an event and I'll definitely come to this. Well, Friday, if they're an MP, might be their constituency day, and there's 10 things in the diary. So timing is really important, giving people enough time and space to know when to go. The reality is also MPs and politicians may want something out of this engagement. They may want to raise their own profile, depending on the time of year and events that are taking place. We've got to accept the fact that that's it, that they want to come and listen. But you know, I've had so many stories, you will have experienced myself in this group on the call, of them turning up to want to be at an event and have a photograph taken and do something and then wander off, and some of that is it's annoying, I think, but sometimes you accept it because it's about building that relationship and being, if they know they can keep coming back to you to be that place that we can have that profile raising photograph or engagement. The time you want something from them, it gives you more opportunity because, you know, you've benefited them. And it may feel like it leads to nothing, or it may lead to nothing, but I think it's still worth time. It's perseverance. It takes time to build that relationship, particularly now with new MPs. They've got 5 years, and those MPs will have lots of people saying, we want to work with you. You've got to be the one that's memorable. You've got to be the one that's there to support and go on the long-term journey for them, because actually that's what our experience has shown, is that at times then they come back going, you've been around, you've stuck with us, we're really interested in helping you or raising your profile. If it's having an elected politician like the MP leader of a council increases the chance of PR, sometimes no matter of the story, like, because they're there. You can have a really great story, but it's the fact is, or that I would have seen it in local papers, local social media and things, where you could have a really great report that's talking about amazing work, and then an elected official turns up to at some form of event to open something, and that will be the thing that gets the presence. So it's accepting the fact that they are useful to bump your story higher in the presence of people, and to get more journalists and people being there to report on your story. And I think, you know, Duncan probably reflects on that's the case when those elected officials there. It helps raise the profile of the story. If there's media present at your engagement, and this is two examples where it's happened, is people may go off topic and talk about things they want to share rather than the purpose of the visit. And that's sometimes that is annoying. You just have to accept it's frustrating, but they've been there and they may come back, and you start to build that relationship. But we've had two in the very early years of half. We invited local councils to the launch event. It was on BBC TV and local ITV News. It was brilliant. And then they were interviewed, and they used it as a chance to not talk about the celebration of the fact there's hundreds of kids being fed through the summer holidays, but actually talk about some policy issues they wanted to raise. So they got there 5 minutes in front of it, and it was, we wouldn't be here if, and then launched into a load of policy issues that had nothing to do with half. And it was like, well, you know, we were just in the background of kids running around. But it was a thing that was frustrating. We learned from that about what we need to say to the councillors beforehand, and some of the briefings and things, and ultimately sometimes which councillors to invite. But you know, having the councillors there meant we got the TV there, which was the benefit. And you know, not a name drop in a way, but it's an interesting one that a few years ago, about 18 months ago, Keir Starmer came to visit an LTO in Sunderland. It was all about community safety and young volunteers, and they came to visit to talk about an issue that was locally, and loads of the papers were there, as you can imagine, following him around. And it was just at about the time that Rishi Sunak had a few things in the news about his tax affairs. So every question that was asked by the media was not about the young people, was not about community safety, was about Rishi Sunak. So all this event, all this hoo-ha and things was brilliant, but nothing to do with young people, because the news of the time just completely swamped it. And you had the leader of the opposition at the time asking questions about I think at the time we had the Prime Minister, or it was the Chancellor. So sometimes you've got to swallow the fact that you've got this plan to do something, and the issues of the day could have taken over, you know, and the issues that happen, and they're suddenly in front of a camera, they might want to talk about one thing, the media one might want to talk about something else, and you're the reason for them being there because you've had an event. So, you know, sometimes you have to accept that fact, but that perseverance is really important. And, you know, make sure you follow up. One of the things that I've made mistakes in the past is not following up afterwards. So actually, when it's finished, they might have teams that people do social media and stuff and tweets and stuff. So once the event's done, it's not just leave it there, it's follow-ups, it's sharing information, it's sharing some pictures and reports afterwards, it's keeping that relationship going as opposed to just being a one hit, they've turned up. So even if it feels like it's been a bit of a negative experience, the follow-up is important to keep that consistent message in there and keep that consistent engagement, because over time they are really, really important in terms of the kind of longer term relationship and the opportunities they may present to your organisation. So yeah, and we got one final slide, I think. So in kind of in summary of this, there's a lot of information in there, but that we kind of want to come with kind of four key points that we take from here in terms of some of our experience. That persevere, it may be transactional and success might not be straight away, but it takes time and experience. You learn from doing it and speak to colleagues who have done it, but persevere, I think, and keep building that relationship. Be clear on why you're doing it and the outcome. So we have a public affairs meeting, we understand what the plans are, the outcomes of that. Think about what do we want to get from it, as opposed to just a random ask for a politician to be at something, or a question. Is it about awareness raising? Is it profile raising? Is it to share some information? Think about that connection. Build a relationship. You want to show your value to the local elected officials. You're there, you're doing some important work. You benefit the community, you benefit the people they're meant to represent. You're passionate about issues they're passionate about. It's showing that value, that you're there to be of value to them and to the constituency that they're representing. And remember that they're there to represent you. It's kind of the bookend of this from the first, then that it's about your community, the young people you work with. So it's about sharing key messages and issues you want them to represent and shout about. So if anything, keeping them informed of all the work you do keeps in their heads the profile of the need to support young people, the need for your organisations. It's being at the forefront of their mind all the time. So when they're thinking about what they might invest in, if they've got funding to put into something, what they want to advocate for, what they want to raise at, if they're an MP, raise at Westminster, if you're there at the forefront of their mind with with information, with issues, with positive stories, and you're trusted by them, then those issues come forward. So it's that persistence and that perseverance is really, really key. I think we've come to an end there. I suppose it's a time for, we've hopefully covered all the bits and the outcome we said at the start, and you found it informative. We've got a few minutes left of the time till 1 o'clock to say if there's any questions people want to raise in the chat, we can have a go at answering them. And if you don't have any questions, thank you for your time this afternoon. Hope you found it of use, and we can I'm sure we can PDF the slides and share them out post the workshop, can't we, Duncan?
Yeah, I'll follow up to everyone that's on the call with some useful links and yes, some other useful information about upcoming sessions that we've got on at Street Games.